houses and the kitchens. Isn't this exciting? Amazing how the Most High has in his house kitchens. We've shown you the dining halls. And now we're going to talk about the kettles. And look at this. As you guys know, as we are able to go through the temple series, how we've been able to show you many things that are in the temple, in the place where I'm staying, including these enormous kettles. Look how large this is. Now, of course, this is too big for me, but they're not too big for the wedding supper. But we're going to talk about the kettles. We're talking about the boiling houses. You could see them in the intro of the video. They're in the four corners of the outer court. Okay. And we're going to take a look at what it is we've put together to represent the boiling houses. Okay. So here we have the enormous kettles. And these kettles we can also see in Zechariah chapter 14, where it talks about the kettles shall be Kodesh, shall be holiness to Yahweh. So glory to his name. He has led us to these kettles, which look very much, as you can see, like the kettles in the 3D model. Very exciting. So stay tuned to this video all the way to the end, because we have something special for you. We're going to do a temple recipe. So here we have the kettles. We could see the kettles, holiness to Yahweh. Okay, and of course we find the information about the boiling houses in Ezekiel chapter 46. Now, one thing we want to make note of as a distinction here is we can see that there are kettles in the outer court, what we call the boiling houses. They're also in the inner court, okay, the places for the priest to bake and boil. So there appears to be a distinction, so that there are boiling houses in the outer court, but it does not say that they are places for baking. I want to make note of this because as you look through our renders, you'll see a hearth. And that hearth is serving the purpose of taking the wood and the heat underground in a lower level, as you could see, and then it's, of course, bringing the heat up to the pots. All right, so this is happening both inside and outside the building. Now, what we did is we also made the buildings kind of be two seasons, like a summer setup and a winter setup. We'll talk about that a little more. But once we look at these boiling places, it does not say that they're places for the priest to bake. Now, this is important. We just want to make note of that, because the places for the priest to bake is the grain offering. There's different types of offerings. So that there are offerings, of course, when you have the altar. All right. And then there's offerings for the grain. All right. And so that's the bread. And that's why you need to bake. You need places to bake. So when we're in the outer court and we have these large kettles, one of the things that Ezekiel doesn't say is that there are also places for baking. So what this means is that in the outer court, there's not necessarily the same type of offerings or food, if you were, in the outer court as there is in the inner court. So what does that mean? In the outer court, the type of offerings are only those for the meats, if you were. That's why we have these kettles. And of course, we have a lot of them. So in the intro of the video, what we did is we showed you coming through the north gate into the inner court north gate, and that's the place where you process the sacrifices, okay? And so once the sacrifices are processed, then you would take the meat and bring them to the different four corners of the outer court. And that will be the places for the boiling, all right, and in the large boiling pots, okay? So that's why we took you through in the intro the north gate into the entrance of the outer court, And then you could see another north gate in the inner court, and there were tables there. So those tables sacrificed the offering, and then we turned, and then we went to one of the boiling houses, and we showed you the pots and everything on the inside. Now here's our sketch of our boiling houses. And what we're doing is we're looking at the two sides. One side where you see 4 doors. The length here is 40 cubits. That's the long side. The shorter side, where you see 3 doors, this is 30 cubits. Now what we want to do is point out that we actually, in only these buildings, we have actually an upper and a lower. So that below we do have a basement of what is called inner chambers that we see. Okay, and so what we're suggesting is that we have pots, which you see in black here. This is going to be on the floor level, on this level here, and then the chambers that you see are down below the inner chambers, and they seem to be described as rows of masonry. Okay, so that's what you'll see. When we take a side view, what we have is we have a chamber, we have a hearth in the chamber in the basement, providing the heat to the kettle, which is above. Now we're going to do a walkthrough, and we want to bring you outside the outer court, and we're going to approach the temple complex, and we're heading into the north-facing gate here. And coming in the north gate, we want to take you through the animation, to take you through every step of approaching the temple, because really the east gate is closed. So here we're at the north gate, and we're going inside the north gate, and then we come to the doors, and when the doors open, we're now facing the north gate of the inner court. And we want to bring you here because if we're bringing sacrifices at this point, the sacrifices, the animals that are brought, they are processed here on the tables at the north gate of the inner court. That's what those tables are in front of this area with these chambers here. Okay, now these are not necessarily going into the inner court, but then they would be taken to the boiling houses, to the kitchens. Okay, so now you see the sacrifices are processed, they're taken, and then we're walking in the outer court area, and we're walking towards one of the boiling houses or kitchens. Okay, and as we do, you can see the rows of pillars, and it's described that the boiling houses is a court inside a court. It's like just like we saw the outer court, and we know there's the inner court. They're described the same. So when we're looking at the pillars here, that's like the court, and then within the court is the building, which is like a court, and each would have a row of kettles. So that once the sacrifices are brought and they're taken to one of the kitchens or boiling houses in the 4 corners of the outer court, then they're taken into a kitchen. We'll go inside the boiling house and show you that. But what we're suggesting is that this is allowing for seasonal activities in the temple. So here we're outside, and you see the kettles, and that would be for the summer time, spring, summer time. And that's the court, outside the court. And then inside there are kettles as well, so that we have the building, and inside the building we have kettles for the winter time, fall, winter season. So it's a seasonal aspect was our view here. And there is a building, okay? When we go to read the verses, there is a house that places the boiling bayit in Hebrew, okay? So it is a house. Bayit means house. So here you're having a view of the doors being open to the structure of the building, but really it's a court. And then we can go inside, and we will then be able to see on the inside more of the fall-winter season. Okay, we have the outside, okay, pots, and then on the inside you see the boiling pots and the spaces for the kettles that are inside for the winter. Okay, so that's the main function of this building is what we're showing you. Okay, this is what Ezekiel says. We'll look at the verses shortly, but as we pass through the building, of course, we have the doors open, and we are applying tables, long tables, okay, for cooking. So outside here, there's not doors. There's kind of like big windows, and here you see the pots. We'll look at the pots in Zechariah a little bit later. Pots Kodesh, holy unto Yahweh. So this particular table, you're seeing pots. All right. Then we have cutting boards. Okay, we're going along this long table and showing what essentially is the food processing center. Okay, and remember, there's 4 of these buildings, so this is just one of 4 of these buildings, all right, that are in the 4 corners of the outer court. So the inner court would have buildings as well, which we'll talk about those kitchens. Those are different here. Here you see spoons, utensils, cutting boards, knives, pots, running along the wall, because these are windows that open to the outside, so there's no foot traffic there. Now we've removed this wall, and there would be another table here running across from the left to the right, but so as to not obscure our view, that table is not in place, but now you can see the long table for the food processing. Okay, and then as we turn, we see in the center of the building, the feature, of course, is the kettles. So we have 2 rows of 4 kettles, and up above them we have chimneys. So the chimneys are just taking the the smoke and the hot air and exiting through the top of the building. And again, we're suggesting that this would be more in use in the wintertime to be outside from the rain, so that everything can be done inside, but then it's really too hot to do everything inside in the summer, even with the doors and windows open. So then if we go into the basement, now you can see the basement area of the chambers with the hearths. So here's the hearths that are going to be underneath each kettle. So up above you see the kettle, down below you see the hearth. Now we have the same type of hearth in the inner court, okay? And here you can see the kind of brickwork we've applied. Consider rows of masonry when we read the verses, okay? And here's another one. Now this is a hearth, and this is going to an outside kettle. So if we raise up above to the outside view, there you can see the columns and pillars. That's one of the kettles on the outside. Here's another one, another kettle that's on the outside. And then taking a view down below, we have a hearth. Now, our view is that in these hearths, in these kettles, that they're basically providing the fire to heat the kettle which is up above. But they can be serving the purpose of baking as well. That's what we have in the inner court. But it's an important distinction that there are not grain offerings in the outer court. So there's not any specific instruction to bake in these buildings, okay? Now, we're in the basement. So in the basement, our access up and below is this staircase here. So this is the staircase leading upstairs to the kitchen, and the basement is serving the function of the furnaces. So we have wood down there, and that is for the heat for the furnaces. Now we're on the scribe's chamber, and we're on the upper porch of the scribe's chamber. We're looking out at one of the boiling houses, okay? And what we're attempting to do is show you, okay, that's the boiling houses. This is the outer court. We're looking in the outer court area, and we're turning, and we're looking at the north chamber here in the pink building. Okay. Now at this north chamber, as we look down, we're on the porch of the scribe's chamber. We look down, we can see the other outside kitchens. Now these, okay, also have kettles. We believe that these kettles, the fire and what's being done is not in the basement. It's up above. And what's happening is that these are bakeries, if you were, to bake the offerings. Okay, so this is a nice view of the two different kitchens, all right, from the scribe's chamber.
Okay, here we are with the left side showing King James, right side showing the Septuagint. And we just want to point this out. I'm hoping it appears okay for you. If it doesn't, you can just take a Bible out and read it. But he brought me through the entry at the side of the gate into the holy chambers. This is the north and south chambers of the priests, which looks towards the north. So that's the north chamber. And behold, there was a place on the two sides westward, and he said unto me, this is the place where the priest shall boil the trespass offering and the sin offering, and they shall bake the meat offering or grain offering. Okay. They shall bear them not into the outer court to sanctify the people. So this is in the inner court area, and this is the area we showed you where we have hearths and furnaces for baking the offering. And of course, we do not have these detailed in the boiling houses, okay? So we're just showing you where we have the grain offering in the inner court, but it's not in the outer court. All right, then he brought me forth into the outer court and caused me to pass to the four corners of the court. And behold, in every corner of the court was a court. So think of it like we have the outer court and inner court. Well, the north chambers do the same thing. They have kind of like an outer court and they have like an inner court. So our outer court is the row of pillars. Our inner court is kind of like the building. And in the four corners of the court were courts joined of 40 cubits long and 30 cubits broad. These four corners were one measure. And there was a row of building round about them. Okay, row of building or row of masonry in the four corners. And he made boiling places under the rows round about. Now let's take a look at the Septuagint and read the same thing. And he led me into the courtyard outer, and he led me around upon the four parts of the courtyard, and behold, there was a courtyard according to each of the sides of the courtyard. Upon the four sides of the courtyards were small. In their length, cubits 40, in their breadth, cubits 30. One measure. Okay, that's very similar to what we just read. And there were inner chambers round about them. Okay, the inner chambers to the four, and cooking places existed from beneath. Okay, so we seem to get these chambers, and then beneath them, all right, is something else. So cooking places. So we have the cooking places up above, and beneath them, that's why we have hearths. It's because in the Septuagint, it shows us the cooking places, and then gives us this inner chambers. Okay, these are the houses of the cooks, for which boil the ones ministering to the house the things which were offered in sacrifice by the people. Okay, so that is what we get with the boiling houses by looking at the Septuagint. We seem to get kind of spaces or places to cook, and that's why in the building itself we kind of have cubbyhole spaces for the boiling pots, and again down below chambers as well that have the hearth so as to produce the heat in order to boil the pots. And as we change the page, the King James reads something very similar. There was row of building, okay, round about them, and that's why we have masonry in the four, and they made the boiling places under the row round about. And he said to me, these are the places for them that boil, where the ministers of the house shall boil the sacrifice for the people. All right, let's also go to Zechariah chapter 14, and let's look at the boiling houses here. In that day there will be upon the bells of the horses, and over here in the Septuagint, on the bridles of the horses, holiness to Yahweh, Kodesh unto Yahweh, and the pots in the Lord's house. Okay, so the pots, kettles, and then we get that as well. The bridle of the horse, holiness to the Lord God Almighty, and there will be kettles in the house of the Lord. Now, this doesn't mean literal kettles in the temple, but in the temple complex, there will be houses, okay, for the kettles. And there shall be like bowls before the altar. Every kettle or pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holiness to the Lord of hosts. And all they that sacrifice shall come to take them and boil therein. And in that day there shall be no more Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. Okay? So once again, these are the kettles. These are the boiling pots, if you were. And we see that clearly with in every kettle in Jerusalem and Judah will be holy to the Lord Almighty. And then shall come the ones sacrificing. They shall take of them and they shall cook them. Okay, the same thing. So these pots, these kettles, these places in the Lord's house, these are the boiling houses in the four corners of the outer court.
Okay, this is the special part of the message that I'm super excited to share with you. We're going to make unleavened Ezekiel bread. So this is the ingredients. Take unto you wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millets, fitches, put them in one vessel, make you bread, 20 shekels by weight per day, eat them as barley cakes. Now cakes means it's unleavened bread. Okay, so we're making bread, and you shall bake it. Okay, we have specific instructions, specific ingredients to our Ezekiel bread. All right, and we're going to follow those. We have our wheat, we have our barley, we have our beans. We're using white beans, lima beans, and a few types of lentils. Okay, if we get millet, we will use that as well, but we didn't have that for this example. All right, but then we're going to make this. What we're going to do is we're going to soak our beans overnight. We put them in bowls, and basically we're going to add them in different stages, but we're going to first allow our beans to absorb the water so they'll cook more quickly. So we see many of the beans here in this bowl. This will be our first stage. Here are white beans. These are some large ones, some small ones. And what we're going to do is once we have those, we're going to crush them, old school, and break them down so that, again, will cook faster. These are our lentils. These are the pink lentils. They're going to cook pretty quick, so we have them separate. We have some white rice, and we're going to make all this in our pot here. Okay? So what we're going to do in our Ezekiel bread is we're going to make all this as a mix. We typically make this, and it'll last us 3 to 4 days. What we're going to do is we're going to make bread. So we're going to use this little electric oven, and we're going to use this to also make it as a bread. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cook all this and have this mix readily available to us first. Okay, then what we can do is we can make the bread. Okay, so we're using our kerosene heater here to make our Ezekiel bread in phase 1. So we're going to put our pot, and we're going to put another pot on top of our pot. So what this is going to do is make it almost like an oven. We're not losing all the heat from the bottom of the pan dissipating in the room. And we're going to crush our white beans. Here you see our white beans nice and crushed. Break them into small pieces so that we can then add those into the mix, and they'll cook thoroughly. Now we've made it. Here's our phase 1. Okay, our rice and beans mix, fully cooked. Very nice. We'll keep this over several days, and we can do many things. We can make soup. We can serve as it is. We can make bread, as we're going to do in this example. So we'll take this and we'll use this into many different types of meals. All right. But what we're going to do in this one is we're making bread, right? So then what we're going to do is we have our whole wheat flour. Okay. We have our whole wheat flour. We don't need very much. We're just make a small portion here. And we're going to add some crushed wheat. Bulgur wheat is what it's called. And we're going to add a little bit of that. At this point, we're also going to add a splash of olive oil. Okay, and we're going to add some water. So you want to get a handle on the mixture of the olive oil and water, so what you have is not too dry and it's also not too sticky. Okay, so once we have these here, we're going to use our mix. It doesn't matter if our mix is hot or cold, but we do want it fully cooked, so we can also get our flour and our dough. Once it's there, it will also cook thoroughly, and it'll cook without having to cook thoroughly all the rice and beans mix. All right, so we're adding some here. Now this is the part where we're going to take this, knead it together, and begin to make patties. Okay, it's a little hard to do with the camera, but here you can see a patty. This is one. All right, one patty we have mixed, and there you can see it in the bowl. We'll again get that into a dough. We're going to do two things here for you guys. We're going to do it fried in a pan. And so you can see we just have our patty in a pan. We have a little bit of olive oil, and we're going to do that. But it also says to bake it. So we're going to use our electric oven. We're all going to take another patty, which you can see here. And this one is going to go into our little oven. So it's kind of like a toaster oven to compare it to what you guys are kind of used to. And we're going to use this one, and we're going to do one baked and one fried. Okay, and we're heating it up. Both, you can see the fried version, which I like a little bit better, and we have that one. But the electric one allows us to conserve a little bit. And here you can see them side by side. See our fried on the right and our baked on the left. And this is bread. This is Ezekiel bread. It's unleavened Ezekiel bread. It's no yeast. Okay, and what we do as well is take, in this case, some halloumi cheese. We have some tomatoes and onions to finish it off. And then here you can see we also have our phase one mix of the rice and beans. And there's our meal. That's our Ezekiel bread. Now, in the process of doing this video, I found it, oh boy, it must have been a 1.5 year old bag of potatoes. Oh my goodness, these potatoes, guys, grew into sprouts, into small potatoes. These are all, must have had this a 1.5 years ago. Totally forgot about these potatoes. They were in a fridge, no air, no water, and they grew. So here I'm taking these potatoes, I'm planting them in the garden in a couple places. So now we got potatoes growing. This is amazing. Totally unexpected, but whenever you're in, that's what's about the boiling house. Whenever you're boiling something, you always have potatoes. And so I didn't even go to the stores. I have potatoes growing in the house. So I'm chopping up the potatoes and onions, and I'm also using the mix here, as you can see, to make my rice and beans Ezekiel bread. The boiling houses. So I thought you guys might enjoy that and see a little bit of how we've taken what it says in the scriptures in Ezekiel chapter 4 and apply Ezekiel unleavened bread. Okay, let your bread be without leaven. And we showed you how we can make that into an actual bread where it's not just a mixture of rice, beans, and the wheat and barley, but it is actual bread. So we are super excited, guys, about this video. It's taken me pretty much all week to do this. And the boiling houses. Okay, so we're super excited because we have built and shown you in the 3D model, okay, separate little projects that are separate buildings, and we've built out the interiors. Okay, so our last one, of course, is going to be the temple. We're close to that being completed. But what we have is we have the gates. All right, so we showed you before how we have the gates. and you can go inside the gate and see what it looks like. Okay, we showed you the gates. We showed you the north chamber. All right, we showed you the scribe's chamber. We showed you the king's house. We're going to have another part to the king's house because we have more additional information we want to share with you. So we're doing some of these in more than one part. We shared the king's house. And then we have the boiling houses. And then we have the whole temple complex. Now, what I encourage you to do is utilize the website and go to the What's New section. And you can go in and click on the light blue highlights, which will bring you into the 3D model of the whole temple complex. And then it'll bring you into the model of just that building. For example, at the top of What's New, you'll see the boiling houses at the time of this video being posted. And so then you can go in there and then you can move inside and go inside the temple. So we've built the temple. The temple is here. It says the temple will be built and dedicated in the 12th year. It's the 12th year. And so this is the temple. So it's super exciting for us. It's amazing, great joy. And so I encourage you to go inside and see each building, okay? Now, the north chamber wasn't working very well, so we got that to work. So you can go inside there, see the dining halls, okay? This one, of course, you can see, and we will have our last one, okay, being the temple itself. So thanks for following along, guys. This is such an exciting series. It's definitely the best series I've ever done. And I'm really enjoying every step of it, every process, including the potatoes. So glory to his name. Come to the wedding. Come to the feast of the Lamb. That's what these pots are used for quite often, for big feasts, big gatherings of people, and weddings. So the voice came from the throne saying, "Praise our God, all you his servants that fear his name, both small and great."